Hey guys, welcome back. It's Justin here, and I got another home project for you today. Actually, I'm stepping it up a notch around here. Just finished making this bad boy. It's a cabinet, obviously, but all from scratch. Some plywood, some 2x8s on top, and I'm pretty excited about it. So I was planning on making two. This one here was kind of my test run. Um, Definitely a couple things I'm going to be different on this second one, so I figured I'll, try it. But it was the first time I ever made one, so I'm pretty happy with how it came out. So I thought I'd show you how I made this one, and then let me show you my garage here, because the main trick was I don't have too many tools. I have a skill saw, drill, driver. I just got the sander, which was worth it, but that's pretty much it. I was trying to look at how to make furniture, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, you could do it at home. Just get your table saw and your planer and your router." And I'm like, "No, I don't have any of that stuff." So I got pretty creative here, but I thought it would be helpful to show how I did it for those of you that have basic tools. So I figured I'll break it down into pretty much three parts. There's the box that you build, then we'll go over the countertop, and then the doors. Definitely pretty tricky, but it was pretty fun. I'm excited I did it with the tools that I have. So I'm kind of excited to show it off.
So I'm going to start with making the outside skeleton of the box. Right here I'm using 3/4 plywood. You definitely want to go 3/4. You want this thing to be sturdy when it's done. I'm also using the birch stuff. It's a little more expensive, but it's sturdier and the face is much nicer. So it was worth it to spend a couple bucks to get the nicer wood. But I'm going to be making basically three pieces: the two sides and then the floor. If you can see here, that tool that I'm using, that little guide, I think that was from Craig is the brand, but that was super, super helpful for making straight cuts because I don't have a table saw or anything like that. So I had to do everything by hand, my skill saw. That was, I think, 40 bucks at Home Depot, but made the project a lot nicer. So the dimensions of my cabinet, they're going to be 18 inches deep. It is 30 inches wide and 24 height. So I'm making two sides, basically two rectangles, 18 by 24, and then one for the floor, 30 by 18. So once I have my three large pieces cut, what I'm doing here is I'm cutting two little strips. These are going to be screwed into the inside of the side walls that the floor is going to sit on top of. So what I actually want to do here is I'm putting this little border. I don't know if you can see in the right corner there. I'm putting a little trim piece border around the edge, just give it a little dimensions. I want those pieces, when I put that front border on, I want that front border to be flush with the floor. So I'm cutting these pieces. You see, I'm even measuring there because I want them to be exact. I'm using a 1x4 in the front, which is actually 3.5 inches thick. I want those pieces to be 3.5 inches thick minus the 3/4 inch plywood. So what's that? 2 3/4. So I want those pieces to be 2 3/4 so that when I sit the plywood floor on top of it, it's flush with the front trim, if that makes sense. So now that I got my two side pieces cut and my little strips, I'm just going to use some wood screws and screw those strips into the bottom of the side panels. And you'll see I have two next to each other, so when they sit together, the floor will sit right on top of it. And again, I measured it in a way that when I put the floor on, the front-facing trim will be flush. I don't know if you see me swiping my fingers there. What I'm doing is, I noticed on my last project, rough edges really messed me up. So pretty much anytime I get anything together, I sand it smooth. I take like some 120 sandpaper and just kind of sand all the edges. And here's my floor, and there's my two pieces, and it's going to basically sit like that. Get my two side pieces with the floor on top, and now I'm just going to screw that flooring into those side strips. So now that I have the floor and the two sides done, I'm going to start working on the little back panel. I'm basically just going to cut a whole bunch of strips. You can see that I'm making 4 strips. I'm going to get 4 strips, screw them together, and then get some 1/4 inch plywood and use that for my back panel. I don't need to waste 3/4 inch plywood. It's expensive and it's just the back panel. So I bought a separate sheet of 1/4 inch plywood that I'll use for the back. So here I cut a bunch of strips and now I'm just cutting them to length. Another trick that I'm using here, I don't know if you can see, but I have my speed square up against it. So again, because I don't have a table saw or miter saw or anything, it's pretty difficult to get straight cuts, and straight cuts really make a big difference when you're putting this together. The first cabinet that I did not do any of this, and it was a lot of sanding and caulking and just extra work. So any little trick that you can get to make straight cuts is a huge difference. So now I have all my pieces cut to length. So again, it's a 30 inches wide by 18 inches tall, and I want that all to be even. So I also want the 2 top pieces on top, because I can screw into the sides and the bottom, but I have nothing to screw the top piece in. So I want to make sure the top piece is resting on the top of the side strips, if that makes sense, so that I have something to screw into. I'm putting some glue and I'm going to clamp this like this. I don't think I needed to do that, but honestly, I just got those clamps and I think I was just excited to try my new tools. But I could have just screwed that together, would have been just fine. So I have those strips glued together. I'm going to let that dry for half hour. And now I have my 1/4 inch plywood, and I'm just going to cut a back panel. So again, I'm using that guide tool, which is really nice for straight cuts. So there's my cut back panel. Right now I have it sitting on top of the frame, and I just want to line it all up so that it's perfectly square and flush, and I'm just taking my time. And then I just have some finish nails, and I'm just going to tack it in. There's no weight here, so it doesn't need to be super sturdy, so I don't need to use big wood screws. And then finished nails will be much easier to fill with wood filler and paint later. So I'm just pretty much tacking that panel to the frame. So here I'm on the back side of the frame, and my finished nails were a little long, so I'm just kind of hitting them flush. And voila, back panel done. I'm going to grab my cabinet and just see if it fits. And I'm going to again use my wood screws and just screw this back panel down into the floor, and again sideways into the side walls. So this is helpful to see. I can screw the bottom in and the 2 sides in, but I have nothing to screw that top panel in, which is why it was important to rest that on the top of the sides and glue it so that it has a little strength, so the panel's not all wobbly. So now that I have the skeleton of the box done, the 2 sides, the floor, the back panel, I got some 1x4. This is Select Pine that I'm using. So again, it's just nicer. It'll look better when you paint it. It's got no knots or nothing like that. So again, worth a couple, whatever that is, cents more for the nicer wood. And I'm just going to basically put a trim along the bottom of it. So one of the things that I did not do on the first piece that you'll see a lot that I'm doing here is sanding. I know it's not the funnest, but pretty much anytime I make a cut, I just take that 120 grit sandpaper and just on a block, and I just make a couple passes. It just cleans it up, gets all the little furs out, make sure the cut is, like I said, perfectly straight. And I noticed on this piece, having straight cuts and just sanding, it makes a huge difference when you're putting it all together, from looking like, rigged up to an actual piece of furniture. So now that I have that piece cut, I'm going to just put some glue on the back side of it. And again, I'm going to use the finish nails to just tack it in place. The glue will hold it good, so I don't need wood screws. And the finish nails, like I said, are easier to cover over. So between the glue and the finish nails, that's all that I need. Okay, so now I know I was just excited about using my clamps, but they actually are helpful for once you get it flush. If you clamp it in place, it doesn't slide. The glue's a little slippery and you can tack it easier, but I think I'm going a little crazy with the clamps. So once I tack it in place, again, I just take the sanding block and just a couple passes along all the sides. I get a clean cloth and wipe up any excess glue. Definitely want to wipe that off now before it hardens. Otherwise, it's terrible to sand later, which again, I figured out on my first run. So now I have, you can see I have that trim piece all along the bottom, both on both sides and also in the front. Also, I want the front to be the face. So I want to make sure the front is overlapping the two sides so that I don't have you don't see a cut from the front. So that's important. And now what I'm doing is I'm going to put another face frame along the front of the cabinet. For that, I use just 1 by 2 inch select pine. I just want my measurements to be perfect. And here comes my foreman on the job telling me my measurements a little bit off. Say, no, you got to hold it like this. Oh, okay. Thank you, sir. So here's the material that I'm using for the face frame. So it's just 1 by 2 inch, again, select pine. I might have used Poplar on the front actually, but I think that's just because they didn't have any select pine, but it all gets painted at the end. So I'm not really worried if the material doesn't match. So I'm going to put a bead of glue on the bottom and then take my front face trim, set it on top, and again, just tack it down with some finish screws. And now I have the bottom front faceplate on. I'm going to do the side front faceplates on. And I'm just sanding it, wiping the dust off. And I'm going to do the same thing. Put a little layer of glue and use some finish nails to tack the sides on. The sides are flush to the side. So it's a 1 by 2. It's going to stick into the cabinet, you know, whatever that is, 3/4 of an inch. So here's where I get a little creative. I'm putting this top faceplate in. So I have a little bit of glue, but I don't have my clamp isn't big enough to clamp that in there. On this particular case, I don't want the top piece longer because then you would see the cut end from the two sides. Whereas if the sides are longer, the cut end is on top and the countertop will sit on top of it so you won't see it. So what I actually did was I took some finish nails and tacked them into the sides and cut the ends off so that they're sharp. And I'm going to put it in between there with the finish nails in and basically, so you can see there I have the 2 finish nails sticking in. And then I'm going to hammer it down so that the finish nails stick in and hold it that way. And again, it's glue. So I'm taking a little piece of block. I don't want to hammer right on the wood because I'll leave marks. So I'm just taking a block, getting that thing right in place, and then you see that I'm whacking it in place so that those finish nails will, between the finish nails and the glue, that will hold it in place. And voila, there's my finished product of the carcass. I got all my sides, a little decorative trim plate along the bottom, and then the face frame in the front. Man, it's crazy how easy it looks when I'm editing it. But that took me, I'd say, probably 2, 4, 6, 8, maybe 8 hours to make that. I do it in a couple hours a night. I got the kid and everything, so I can't just do it in one straight shot. But yeah, I'd say it took me maybe 7 hours, I would say. But I think it comes out great. I'm going to start working on the countertop next. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next part.